Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online character build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, I bring you the Nature's Ward Paladin. Now before I get started, disclaimer, this is a roleplay, casual play build. It is not meant for meta play. Now, moving on to the little story behind them, they are guardians and protectors of the wild. Nature's Ward Paladins are basically like nature's guardians, but being different from nature's guardian itself, they take on the idea of, hey, I'm here to help protect and aid those who live within the forest, the druids, the rangers, the forestmen, the woodsmen, that kind of stuff. They guard and protect those kind of people, and that's kind of within their boundary of design. And they utilize nature's powers of divine power to bring order to chaos within nature itself. So this is the Nature's Ward Paladin. Their primary role is going to be tank. They can be healers and damage dealers. They can work as all three. And they're very powerful at it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the character build. You guys might notice some resemblances here to some other build I have made, and some of you might really like this because of it. As you can see, we are a Wood Elf Warden with this. Now, you can be any race, and I want to be clear on that. Any race can play this. It doesn't have to be just a Wood Elf. High Elves can play it, Argonians, Orcs, you name it. They all can play this build. So moving on, for this character to be a tank, I have to do a little bit of a split. So I put 40 into health, 10 into magicka, 14 into stamina. This gives me a better range of resources for the different roles. Not the different roles, but to utilize all three resource types while I'm playing a tank. Now, for this character to be really effective as a damage dealer, what you do is you take the 40 points out of health and you pretty much split it between magicka and stamina. This is for when you're playing a damage dealer in Overland, or if your group needs an extra damage dealer, you can play this still as a damage dealer, but you want to focus more into the magicka side than the stamina side. The magicka side, you want about 28k fully buffed. The magicka or stamina side, you're going to want around 25k. The reason why is this gives you a good mix of stamina and magicka, but you got to remember, most of my paladin builds are magicka based. They're primarily magicka based damage dealers with the ability to use stamina weapons. So the next thing is, if you're going to play this as a healer, take everything out of health and stamina and put it into magicka. And they do make really effective healers. Now, going over the stats as a tank, we have 21,000 max magicka, 34k health, 23k stamina, and this is for a wood elf. We have an 838 magic recovery with a 397 health recovery and a 905 stamina recovery. We do have an 1839 spell damage with a 26% spell critical, a 1929 weapon damage with a 28% weapon critical. We do have 22,000 spell resist with 22,000 physical resist because we are a heavy armor build, and the way we set this character up, we get a decent amount of resistances for survivability. We are using the Lord Mundus Stone. Now, you don't have to use the Lord Mundus Stone if you don't want to. I use it because I'm a Wood Elf and I need that higher health pool to make me a more effective tank. We do get minor heroes at all times, and we do use Tri-Stat Food. This is going to give you max health, magicka, and stamina at 4105 with the stamina and magicka, and then 4462 with the max health. Moving on to the gear and equipment that we use. So starting with the potions, we use tripods primarily when we're tanking. When we're playing as a healer, we use spell power pots. When we're playing as a damage dealer, we use the warrior power pots or the stamina power pots. The reason we do this is so when we're playing the different roles, we can take advantage of all the different resources we have access to. Alright, moving on now to the food. We do use longfin pasty with melon sauce. This is going to give you health, magic, and stamina like raised. So you want to use this because you do use all three resources. No matter what role you're playing, tank, healer, or damage dealer, you will use all three resources. Alright, now we're going to go over the monster set, the body set, and the jewelry and weapons set. So starting with the monster set, we are using Ice Hearts. You guys should know this. When I make Warden tanks, I 90% of the time will use Ice Hearts because it's a very powerful set. With this particular setup, it's very powerful. So, with Ice Hearts, you get the one piece. It adds spell critical. When you deal critical damage, you have a 20% chance to gain a damage shield that absorbs X amount of damage for 6 seconds. While the damage shield holds, you deal X amount of frost damage to all enemies within 5 meters every second. This effect can occur once every 6 seconds. Now, I didn't do this, but I'm going to do this real quick, and I apologize that. For playing a tank, you don't have to use the Lord Munda Stone. Depending on some races, you might want to use the Lady Munda Stone, like in playing an Imperial. When you're playing like a Dark Elf, you know, as a tank, you might want to stick with the Lord with anything that has low health value. If you're playing an Imperial, a Nord, or an Argonian, or even an Orc, you can go with different Munda Stone, like the Lady Munda Stone for the higher resistances, like I said. In some cases, you can even go with the Atronach Munda Stone, like on the Nord, and you can actually pull off quite a bit. Now, moving on to, if you're going to play this as a healer, Atronach Munda Stone is your best choice. This is going to give you the higher spell recovery. Alright, now moving on again through the gear, like I said, Ice Hearts is really good for this because you get that damage shield, and it's a very powerful damage shield, and it pretty much procs non-stop. Moving on to the enchants and stuff real quick on this. Well, going on to the next set before we get there. The next set we're using is Gladiators. I like Gladiators with this build, and I'm going to explain why. We're very heavily Magicka focused. So our damage, weapon damage and stuff, isn't as important as our magic damage. The only time that our weapon damage is going to become really important is once we get the enemy below 25% health, and we're getting that 5% increase in our light and heavy attacks from the CP, and this 1800 weapon damage. Because when we're weaving light and heavy attacks in there, and we're doing the light attacks, every light and heavy attack gets 1800 weapon damage behind it. So it allows us to maximize our capabilities with this character in both PvE and PvP. But also as a damage dealer and a tank. Now moving on to the next set, you guys already know it's Shulks. Adds max health on the 2-piece, 3-piece adds spell damage, 4-piece spell critical. So we do have 2 things of spell crit, 2 things of weapon crit with this, because we are using Ice Hearts with it. And Ice Hearts just fits the idea of this whole, like, I'm a nature-based protector. So this really plays into that really well, and I really like that. The other thing I really like is the fact that you gain minor heroism at all times while you are in combat, generating 1 ultimate every 1.5 seconds. So this allows you to drop ultimates more effectively, more often. Now going over the traits and enchants. On the smaller pieces, we are using 4 sturdy pieces here. And the reason we're using sturdy is to give us greater block cost management. So we're not spending a lot of resources blocking attacks. As a tank, that's your one of your primary defensive tactics is to block attacks. So not wasting resources is going to be really important for you, since that's something you do quite a bit. Now I will say this. On the smaller pieces, I do change my enchants up on my tank builds. I run 2 healthy, 1 on the shoulders, 1 on the belt, and then I run 1 stamina, 1 magicka. Now the reason I do that is because being a tank, you want to hybridize more so you can take advantage of both magicka and stamina resources effectively. Wood Elves are just really good with stamina management, and they also can build into high magic recovery management. So this is why I chose the Wood Elf for this. Now onto the bigger pieces. And before I go any further, the smaller pieces are all sturdy again, and they fit really well into this. But onto the bigger pieces. The helm and legs are both invigorating, and the reason why is because heavy armor doesn't have a resource management to where it can give you resources back as effectively unless you take damage. So this allows us, when we're playing as a hybrid damage dealer, we can take advantage of that stam and mag recovery more effectively. Sorry guys. Again, allergies suck. On the big pieces, we are using tri-stats. This is to maximize our resistance, our capability to play a hybridized type build. And on the helm and the belt, we are using light and medium. Light belt, medium helm, everything else is heavy. And then moving on to the final piece, our chest, we are using reinforced. Now, I'm not going to keep explaining this, but the reason why we use reinforced is to maximize this one piece of heavy armor's resistance. When you use a heavy chest, you want to maximize your resistance value as much as you can, so this is the one piece that's going to do it best, reinforced. Moving on now to the jewelry. We are running 2 tri-rune rings, one with a weapon damage, the other one with a spell damage. Now this is so we can maximize our spell damage capabilities with our weapon damage capabilities. The other thing is that we are using an infused necklace with a mag recovery. This is so we can manage our magicka resource return better. Onto the weapons, sword and shield. On the shield, we are using a sturdy with a tri-stat. This is so we can maximize, again, our resource pools as a tank, but also the sturdy so we get a greater block cost reduction. Now moving on to the weapon. On the main hand, we are using a Nirnhund sword with an absorb stamina. The reason we use the absorb stamina is so we can maintain our stamina resource as a tank. On the back bar, we are using a bow with a infused enchant trait to increase the weapon enchant effect by 30% and reduce the enchantment's cooldown by 50%. So as you can see, we're using a weapon and spell damage enchant, which gives us 452 total spell and weapon damage when this is active. And the effectiveness, as you can see, is increased by 30%. So that's why it's 452. The 5 seconds means it can trigger every 5 seconds. With this one, it triggers every 3 seconds. And with the ability we use to keep that applied, we actually use Venom Arrow. And it's going to tick damage over time on one target. And it's going to give you that higher spell and spell and weapon damage to allow you to play more spell or more magical plus melee. So physical versus magic. Alright, now that you guys have seen that, let's move on to the skills. The skills. Starting with the class skills. I take all the ultimate, active abilities, and passives for the class, no matter what I'm playing, because this way, no matter what role I choose I want to be in, whether it be a tank, a healer, or damage dealer, I can effectively use these skills to my advantage. So since I'm a tank, you'll see I have 3 of these abilities here, which gives me increased resistances on the front bar, and on the back bar, when you look, I only have 1 or 2 of them, so I actually get 1,000 extra. But that's fine, I don't need a lot of resistances on the back bar. So, on top of that, I get Glacial Presence, increases your chance of applying chill to enemies with Winter's Embrace abilities. And then I have Icy Aura, which reduces the effectiveness of snares applied to you by 15%. And then we have increase your magic frost damage by 6%. If you guys haven't seen my Knight build, the Druidic Knight, this also applies to that 50% snare reduction. So they actually get a 65 plus another 4%. They have a 74% or 64% or 69%, almost 70%. Effectiveness of snares. So that's why I like that set on that character. Alright. Now, we are going to go over the weapon skills. Primary weapons are one-handed sword and shield, so we do take the active abilities, ultimate, and passives here as well. Now, again, I'm going to leave this up to you guys. If you don't want to use any of these skills, you just want to play this primarily as a tank, you can do that. You don't have to take all the active abilities or anything like that. This is just suggestion. Bow, ultimate, active abilities, and passives, because this is our secondary weapon we use. Now, you can learn any of these other weapon skills. As you can see, I still have a lot of skill points left over. That's mainly because I'm on PTS, and I get every skill point the game has to offer on this character template. But you can go out and earn these skill points by doing the main quest, dungeons, or the main faction or main story quests. You get a skill point for every main part you complete. So in some areas you're going to get like 6 to 8 for doing just a quest line, depending, like I said. And then you get more for doing different things within the zone, from finding sky shards. And yes, even some dolmens will give you skill points. If they have a named encounter at it and you complete that named encounter for the first time, it does have a chance. And I'm saying this, not all of them do. It's certain named ones at dolmens. And I don't know if this is the same for abyssal geysers and everything else, but I do know this from dolmens for a fact, because I was playing my main character the other day. I completed a dolmen, and it said, you earned a skill point. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't know that. So there is skill points in dolmens as well. But it only, like I said, it only happens with certain things. It's just like when you play through a public dungeon. When you play through a public dungeon, there's the sky shard, and then if you complete the group encounter in there, there is some group encounters that also reward you with a skill point. Now, I don't know if this is just something I'm seeing wrong or whatever on my screen, but I do get this pop-up every once in a while on my screen saying, you earned a skill point from completing, when you defeat these bosses. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then there's skill points you can get from the sky shards, the all dungeons, normal dungeons, veteran dungeons. Doesn't matter which one you do it on, what difficulty, you always get a skill point if you play through the story of the dungeons, and also trials give you a skill point when you complete it on normal difficulty, veteran difficulty, it doesn't matter. Armor skills. Light armor. We take the top 3. This is very important. So I'm going to go over this again. Grace gives you reduced snare effects, reduced sprint costs. This gives you increased mag recovery, reduced magicka cost, and then we get spell warding. It's a small benefit, but every benefit that plays into your character's advantage is a benefit, no matter how small it is. Same thing with medium armor. We take the top 2 and the bottom 1. This is so we can maximize our capability of playing our character in different roles, but also take advantage of the armor benefits, even no matter how small, like I said. Heavy armor, we do take all of these because we are a heavy armor build. Active ability is questionable here. You can choose to take this one. I use this every once in a while when I'm playing PvP or Battlegrounds, than my own group buff thing, because of the fact that this grants me immunity to knockbacks, disabling effects for 4 seconds whenever I activate this. So as soon as I activate it, I get that disabling thing, and I can also reactivate it if I'm affected by it, and it will remove them. So, and that's only if I'm not in the cooldown range. Soul magic, you can be a vampire or werewolf with this. I'm going to let you know that now. I choose not to do a lot of my builds with vampire and werewolf, mainly because I like to build around those ideas of vampire and werewolf. Ultimates, we do use the ultimates here, plus the active ability and passives. Now, the first passive, these 2 abilities are optional. I use them quite a bit, depending on the situation role. If I'm playing like out in the world and I want more damage, I'll grab Shatter Soul sometimes and use it on the back bar where my bow is, so I get this like heavy beam attack that can hit a target and then it explodes and deals more damage to targets around it. It's actually really nice. But that's why I use it. But mainly summons and Soul Lock are really, really, really good for you no matter what you play. Now moving on to fighter skill. I do take all the active abilities and passive here and ultimate for different situations. Now, a lot of people are going to say, but you take Dawnbreaker as smiting, that's a worthless skill. It's not a worthless skill. It's actually a really powerful skill when you know how to use it, both in PvE and PvP. Mage, I take all the ultimates, active abilities, and passives here, just so I can use them in different situations. Same thing with the Psijic Order. Undaunted, I do take all the active abilities and passive skills. Now, one of the things I want to point out here before I go any further, if I happen to make a character that is based on an assassin type, I will also learn the Dark Brotherhood skills. If I'm doing one that's based on more the thief type, I will learn the Thieves Guild skills. All my characters max out Ledgerman. because of how I play my characters in different content, I'm always opening chests. So I'm always working on my Ledgerman, and I always max it out on all my characters so I can get that ease of getting chests when I'm farming them in the overland. Alright, Undaunted, I do take all the active abilities. These are all synergies, so it also helps with your group, and then the 2 passives are very important. Moving on to Assault, I take the active abilities and the ultimate in the Assault line that best reflect my ability to play PvE. So these are primarily for PvE skills. These are primarily for PvE skills, and the passive is for PvE. All this other stuff that's blacked out is all for PvP primarily. Racial, Wood Elf. Wood Elf's really good at this because, one, we get increased experience gain with a bow. So using a bow on the back bar, you will be able to boost it faster and leveling. Hunter's Eye, you increase your stealth detection by 3 radius, but you also increase your movement speed by 10% and physical and spell resist by 1500 for 6 seconds after you roll dodge. And you also have a passive CP element that gives you even more resistances when you roll dodge. So next up is Ifri's Endurance. This one increases your stam recovery by 258. And then we have Resist Affliction, which increases your max stam by 2000 and your poison resistance by 2310, and you gain immunity to poison status effects. Alchemy, medicinal use. This one, when using a potion, resulting effects last 30% longer, and then Provisioning, Gourmand, and Connoisseur. This one adds 20 minutes to your eaten food duration. This adds 20 minutes to your drink duration. So, alright. Now that I've done that, we're going to go over our active abilities on our bar. Now I'm calling these active abilities on our bar from now on because that's what they are. These are the main active abilities we use when we're tanking. This does not mean that we don't use any of our other abilities that are also unlocked when we're tanking or playing damage dealer. We use all active abilities, again, in different situations. So starting with the front bar, we have Pierce Armor. Now this is your primary taunt. This taunts the enemy for 15 seconds. It also deals physical damage to the enemy, and then also inflicts the enemy with major fracture and major breach, reducing their resistance to spell and physical damage by 50 to 80. We use this when we're tanking. Now when we're not tanking, we actually use Shulks to apply major breach. We don't worry about major fracture because we do a lot of magic based stuff. Next, we use Deep Slash. This does physical damage up front, X amount of damage to 2 nearby targets, and you also reduce their movement speed to all enemies by 60% for 4 seconds. We're not using Heroic Slash because we already have Minor Heroism built into our armor. So we get that higher capability of Ultimate Gen. Now moving on to the next ability, we do have Shimmering Shield. Well, let me finish this one. So also afflicts the enemies with minor maim, reducing their damage done by 15% for 12 seconds. So if you have 3 targets close by in a 5-meter arc in front of you, you can apply Deep Slashes, minor maim, and the damage. Then we have Shimmering Shield. Now this one is a shield that absorbs X amount of damage from 3 projectiles. Each time you absorb a projectile, you restore X amount of magicka and gain major heroism for 6 seconds, granting you 3 ultimate every 1.5 seconds. So you actually get, what is it? 12 ultimate, so that's pretty good. Next up, we have Polar Wind. Now this one, you instantly cast this winter wind around you, and when you do, it heals you for X amount, and then it heals you for X amount every 2 seconds for 10 seconds, and then the winds will cast out from you also and heal a nearby ally, and it heals them for X amount of health too. And this ability scales with your max health. Next ability we have is Absorb Magic. Now this bolsters your defenses to absorb up to X amount of damage from the next spell projectile cast at you and healing you for 16% of the max health while you have a shield equipped. And this ability slotted, the amount of damage you can block is increased by 8%, and the cost of blocking is reduced by 8%. Then we have our next ability, which is our ultimate. This is Northern Storm. If you guys have seen my Northern Wind build, they use the same thing. But this creates a storm around you that deals X amount of frost damage every second for 8 seconds, reducing the movement speed of enemies inside by 40%, and then you and nearby allies gain major protection, reducing your damage taken by 30%, and then while slotted, you have an 8% chance to increase, you increase your max magic by 8%. That's it. Moving on to the back bar. First ability we have is called Venom Arrow. This does damage up front, damage over 10 seconds. This allows you to keep your weapon damage enchant applied better. And then each time you hit an enemy with this, if they're casting an ability, it doesn't matter whether it's a stamina or magic ability, you can interrupt them, set them off balance, and stun them for 3 seconds. Next ability we have is called Gripping Shards. Now this creates an AoE around you in a 6-meter radius for 12 seconds that deals X amount of frost damage every second. Enemies that are hit are overcome with bitter cold, reducing their movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. And they also get damage done is based on your max health, and it has a higher chance to apply critical or chilled status effect. So the next ability we have is called Blue Betty. Now this one, you call upon a Blue Betty Netch to give you X amount of resources over 27 seconds. It also grants you major sorcery, increasing your spell damage by 20%. And then while the Netch is summoned, it removes 1 negative effect from you every time you summon it. So you can just spam this because it costs nothing, and it just gives you that ability to remove negative effects. Next ability we have is called Ice Fortress. Now this one, you basically shoot your you cast this buff that grants you and your allies within 8 meters of you Major Warden, Major Resolve for 24 seconds, reducing physical or increasing physical and spell resist by 5,280. You also gain Minor Protection, reducing your damage taken by 8% for 24 seconds. Next ability we have is called Inner Light. Now this one, you basically have it here for the slotted purpose. While slotted, your max magic is increased by 5%, and you gain Major Prophecy, increasing your spell critical rating by 2191. On the back bar, this works great because it applies to this. This does magic base band damage, so this does give you the Major Prophecy side when you have this active, or when you activate this. Next ability we have is our ultimate. This is our Warhorn, aggressive Warhorn. Now what this does is it rallies your allies around you, increasing their max health, or max magicka and max stamina by 10% for 30 seconds. It is a 20-meter radius around you. It's a large area that gets affected by this, and you and your allies gain major force, increasing critical damage by 15% for 9 seconds. And that is the skills, guys. Now we're going to go over CP really quick. Starting with the red tree, we have 56 in the Ironclad, reducing your damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. 18 into Spell Shield, increasing your spell resistance by 1729. And then moving on over here, we have 31 into Thick Skin, reducing your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. 43 into Hardy, reducing your damage taken from physical, poison, disease damage by 10%. 43 in Elemental Defender, reducing your damage taken from Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%. And then moving on to the final red tree, we have 40 in the Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%, and this is any damage shield you have applied to you from any source. We also have 19 in a Quick Recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%, and then 20 in the Heavy Armor Focus, increasing your physical resistance by 1900 for wearing 5 or more pieces of heavy armor. Moving on to the middle, or to the green tree, 40 in the Warlord, reducing break free cost by 16%, 16 into Sprinter, reducing your sprint cost by 10%, 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing your bash cost by 10%. Moving on to the middle tree here, we have 43 in the Mooncalf, increasing stam recovery by 10%, and then we have 75 in a Tenacity. This increases your magicka and your stamina return of your fully charged heavy attacks by 14%. This applies with your heavy armor passive and your other base 30%. So your base 30% plus the 25% from heavy armor, that's a 55%. With this, it goes to 69% increase of returns from heavy attacks. Moving on to the final green tree. We have 40 into Tumbling, reducing dodge roll cost by 16%, and 40 into Shadow Word, reducing your block cost by 16%. Moving on to the blue tree. We are hybridized here. So we have 43 in the Blessed, increasing your healing done by 10%, 23 in the Elfborn, increasing your critical damage and critical healing done with magic abilities by 22%, 43 in the Elemental Expert, increasing your Flame Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 10%, and then moving on over here, we have 35 in the Physical Weapon Expert. This increases the damage done with light and heavy attacks with two-handed, one-handed, and shield, dual-wield bow, weapons, and werewolf form by 20%. And then we have 40 in the Master at Arms. This increases your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. Now moving on over here, we have 43 in the Mighty. This increases your physical, poison, disease damage by 10%. You have 23 in the Precise Strikes. This increases your critical damage and critical healing with stamina abilities by 10%. And then 20 into Thaumaturge, increasing your damage done with damage over time effects by 9.4%, or 9%. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and take a look at this thing in a dungeon setting. Oops. So let's go ahead and jump over to Depths of Malatar. This way you guys can see how effective this thing can be in its dungeon, or in a dungeon. Really? Do this 100 times a day, and today it picks the one day it wants to do that. So yeah, but it's a really fun thing to test this way. I really enjoy testing builds this way, going in on a normal, seeing how far I can push myself into a dungeon or a trial or something with a character, because it just proves that this character has got the ability to withstand a lot of damage. And I do this with all my characters, so this way you guys can see how they work effectively as solo play, tanks, or healers. As a tank, you can solo play as a tank. It's super easy. It just takes a long time to kill anything, for most people. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and run into the next chamber, and once we get in here, we are going to buff ourselves up, and then start tanking these enemies, even though we're not going to be tanking them like you would in a group. So we're going to go ahead and pop our potion, so we can get our recovery rate started. Gonna pop Northern Wind so we can get that AoE ice damage going. And the reason why we use 2 dots, by the way, is so this way we can get that higher chance of the Ice Heart going off. So go ahead and pop the potion again. I know a lot of people think I don't block, but I do block a lot. It's just you don't see it a lot of the times when I'm doing it, because I do it so fast. So alright, now we're going to go in and face down the big cheese, who's everybody's favorite enemy to fight. Oops. Wrong ability. Come get me, ugly. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and let this guy kill us. And that way we can go back to the beginning and I can close out this video. Come on, disease us, or poison us, or whatever it is you do. The shrine. Alright, but that, my friends, is the Nature's Ward Paladin. I hope you guys like it. This was actually one of the builds that I've been wanting to do for a while because somebody keeps asking me, hey Sherman, can you remake your old Northern Wind that you used that had two-handed axe and a bow? And I was like, I got something coming, but it's not the same, and it might actually be something you guys might like. So this is it, the Nature's Ward Paladin. So you guys know what's coming next. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.